Hello, BookTube, and welcome to something a bit unusual for my channel, where with my channel I'm usually interviewing authors or talking to other booktubers or regular guests. Today I'm interviewing Peter Wheeler, who is a member of the Social Democratic Party and has, for the SDP, stood as a candidate in both local and general elections. So he stood in 2023 in the Hempstead and Wigmore ward as the SDP candidate in Medway Council. Then last year, during the general election, he was the SDP's parliamentary candidate in the constituency Gillingham Rainham, and this February he stood in as the SDP candidate in Gillingham South ward in a by-election on Medway Council. Now, I should say that whilst Peter is a very public and active member of the SDP, and the SDP will come up quite often in this interview, Peter is here in a purely private capacity. He's not an official representative of the SDP. So I just want to make that clear for anybody watching this. So first, I'd just like to say thank you, Peter, for coming to be interviewed.
Absolute pleasure, Aaron. Great to be here. Hello to anyone who's watching. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, looks like we've got 3 already. So that, with any luck,
3.
Yeah, 3 more than usual at this point, so we're doing good. The first question I have is, how has your experience been standing in elections for the past few years?
It's been a revelation. It's done me a lot of good. Character building in some areas. I didn't think my character could have anything else left to add, but apparently it did need a few things. At times humbling, educational, broadening, improving. It's good for your courage. That's a good one. Very much so. So I recommend it to anybody, young and old. Give it a try. Council elections are slightly easier because you need fewer signatures to get the whole thing off the ground. But I would absolutely recommend it to especially to young people, rather than doing a lot of other things that might be less improving. Excuse me, I need a sip of tea. Absolutely, thoroughly recommend the experience.
Yeah, in terms of the differences between standing for, say, local elections versus a general election, other than obviously, as you mentioned, the number of signatures you need, what would you say is the biggest sort of qualitative difference in terms of campaigning?
Obviously, there's more people you're trying to reach, so the scope of it is much larger, and how you reach them, and the issues, in a national campaign. I mean, as William will often say, William Clouston will often say, all politics is local politics, but you're not talking about bus stops, you're talking about the direction of the country, how you want it to be, your vision for the country, how you would enact that, how that would play out on the ground were you to be successful. So it's the greater scope of it, certainly, and other things that I'll think of as we talk.
Yeah, I should say I have in the past. I did actually. I worked for my local MP in a general election, and sort of business that you get up to is, if you're not the candidate, a lot of it is literally you're taking the party literature, you're just putting it through letterboxes.
It's a walking around exercise. It's a talking exercise. You've got to put the miles in. I mean, for the first time since I was probably 20, I walked 9 miles in one day. The other week, just before the Gillingham South one, and I was, as I say, you break new ground, and it's improving. Well, there you go. 9 miles was very improving for me, let's say.
Yeah, it is. As you say, it is a lot of walking, and say not necessarily the best weather sometimes that you'll sort of
a lot of them. This is the other part of it. Sorry to go back to your original question. It's a lot of it's not optional. You want to do it, you've got to get the flyers printed. You've got to reach certain amounts of people. You've got to be aware of the postal votes. Incredibly important. There's sort of 2 elections. There's the postal vote election and the actual election, and you can easily lose both if you don't. But you need. It's quite a lot of people involved, or you have to be very realistic and cut your cloth according to what you really can do in that amount of time with that amount of people. It does help to have an agent. my agent this time, Steve Tanner, was absolutely brilliant. I thoroughly recommend him and agents generally, because it's even tougher on your own. Obviously, Mr. 53-year-old here, I just had to remind myself how old I am. You know, I can't knock a leaflet up, a flyer competently, and there's a lot of things I can't do. So I need that kind of help. What I can do is walk around and talk to people and push the message, and things like this.
Yeah, and it does that. Having that team around does help. The fact that you've got people willing to come out and volunteer their time to sort of go out and do the leafleting, to knock on doors, to speak to people, which you obviously as the candidate can't do on your own.
You can only do so much, and it's about correct apportioning of resources as well. It's having the wisdom or the judgment to say, I'm better used in that time there doing that than something else that maybe anybody could do, maybe. But, you know, as you said yourself, you've helped out before. When politicians stand on the rostrum, the dais, and say, you know, thank you to my team, and they mean it, and you can see it in their eyes, because you're not who you are without them. You're your personality, but somebody's got to get you there, you know? You're like a heavy antique that's all very nice in the shop, but someone's got to shift you into somebody's house. It's a really bad analogy, and I think I'll stick with that one.
And obviously, you were standing for the SDP, which is
the Social Democratic Party.
Yeah, and very much it's a smaller party at the moment. And
it's smallish. I mean, it's growing for a start. It's breaking new ground all the time. I think there is a misconception. People who've heard of us before say, oh, you haven't gone anywhere in 30, 40 years. Because, of course, the original party started a long time ago. But if you like, that went dormant for a couple of decades, if you like. I think I'm not incorrect. Sorry to anybody if I've got any of the facts wrong. Not the first time. So the party as you know it now, as you will see it now, is there past for 4 years, 5 years maybe? Absolutely not to decry everybody who was keeping the pilot light on before that. And I've met a lot of those people. They're brilliant, absolute stand-up people. And without them, we wouldn't be here. But I'm very glad we are here. But it's a very modern party in that sense. The incarnation is recent.
Yeah, and it's interesting to look at the Social Democratic Party in sort of iterations. The first sort of iteration in the early 80s is very much a sort of it has big beasts in it. You've got Shirley,
just about still a kid really at the time, but I remember them all sitting at the table. I especially remembered Shirley Williams, who I always followed all the way through. I was always very interested in her because her parliamentary knowledge. Tony Benn always had that. Was one of the big cheeses who could talk about the Constitution, parliamentary stuff. But Shirley Williams was also incredibly interesting on that, and I was always very interested in her. I still would have split had I been of age when the party split. Would have split to the side, the Owenite side, because I also think David Owen is still with us, which is brilliant. Is excellent and always was excellent, and I think it's fairly widely acknowledged across all parties that he's a great talent and had a lot to offer politics.
Yeah, so David Owens is that representative of what I think I'd describe him as the last of the Gateskiellites in terms of British politics. That has sort of, certainly within the Labour Party, that has died out. It does seem to be sort of continuing in the SDP, because I know that William Clouston, who is, for those who don't know, the leader of the party, he's very much mentioned Gateskill before, alongside Peter Shaw. Yeah,
William's very erudite and very well read. However, I'm not. So I would describe it in different terms. When people talk about old Labour or blue Labour and the similarities or the natural home for those people within the SDP, I think it's true. But as the original splinter from the Labour Party, that's what started it. The reasons for continuing it now are more broad. It's not just as simple as, even though it's very true to say that if the direction, the switch in Labour, which I don't know happened pre-97 actually, but just before then, if you're being increasingly unhappy with the direction that Labour's taken, we are much more at the heart of, much closer to what you miss. So it is a natural home for old, I don't want to make people sound old-fashioned, it's not that, but the core values of Labour as they were, all the kind of people that voted Labour then would see a lot, be happy with a lot of the policy they read with the SDP, and be happy with the people in it. Maybe not me, but a lot of people in it, because we are a broad church in that sense. I think Rod Liddell uses a much more disparaging way of describing who we are. But that's right.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed this. Noticed that because though I'm firmly on the right politically, and I wouldn't vote Labour. I do come from, my family very much are traditional working class Labour voters, and I can see the Labour Party, as it presently stands, does not represent them at all, even though it was the party effectively founded for them.
Really not, yeah.
And you, as you said yourself, you are, the SDP is in many ways the continuation of that original tradition. And obviously it's now broader, as you mentioned, but it's still very much there. And if I'm right in saying the SDP could best be described as a left-wing, sort of centre-left party, which is obviously social democratic, but that takes that regards there needs to be restrictions on immigration, is to a degree socially conservative, but strongly interventionist in the economy, and wants the state to have very much a role in sort of not planning the economy, but very much helping polish the edges and making sure that people can work well within sort of mixed economy, but not be controlled by it, as it were.
To regroup that, these labels are so out of date now, but let's just say the working class, which got splintered and found other stuff to do, which is not necessarily traditional working class jobs. Basically, because there's no industry. If we don't have our own industry, or enough of our own industry, we're not industrializing at all. If we think that that's not important, and if we're either flogging it off, indifferent to it, or not making any efforts, or seeing that as even something would need to be made an effort for, then obviously that class of people are thinking, they'll find other jobs and other things to do, but that's not where they're at. That's certainly not their tradition, and that's certainly not where they thrive the best. And no one's speaking to them. It's difficult, because the Labour Party is, of course, it's doing things for people. Also, another word that needs to come back into fashion is the poor. Poor people. Thank you very much. There should be no shame in saying that, because everyone's using, economic crisis and cost of living crisis. There's certain things in my life I'm poor on. It's not an economic crisis, it's not a cost of living crisis. It's, the price of the bills is making me, actually poor. And for a lot of other people, it's more complicated than that, obviously. But the Labour Party seems to create bunches of people who are then codependent on it. And it's a life support machine for those people. And they've tried to increase, the amount of, it could be anything. It could be an ethnic group. It could be a certain amounts of people. I don't know. At the moment, everyone's up in arms, because traditionally, people who rely on benefits would look to a Labour Party to look after them.
Yeah.
But I think this isn't. Even in '97, there were signs of this. There was. They weren't. They were turning their backs on all sorts of people from '97 onwards. Because I was interested in them for about 6 months, a year, I think, at the time, and I soon checked out, because I was like, no, I get it now. It took me ages for the penny to drop. I'd started. I grew up under Thatcherism, which is we'll get onto reform in a while, I'm sure. But I grew up literally my whole youth under that, and there were some good parts of it and some bad parts of it. There were the 3 or 4 boom years, which everybody did fairly well on. This is post miners' strike, of course, but the Labour Party slowly became this other thing, whereas the SDP doesn't create client groups and then service them. It tries to bring a fairness to society as a whole with a communitarian approach.
Yeah.
Rather than based on some ideology. There's no ideology that's shot through our party that's the rudder. It's what's best for the country. It is protectionist. You know, there's a brilliant talk in London, which William spoke on, and Lord Moynihan, I can't remember who was there, somebody else. And they were talking about tariffs. And, you know, William was putting the case forward for protectionism, tariffs. I'm very much on board with that. Yeah. And I think most of the parties is on board with that. You know, that's our approach. But then the other person who's doing that is Donald Trump in America. So it goes across political divides now, doesn't it? There are certain things that people believe in or not. You can't group it then into say you're a left-wing person, you're a right-wing person. It doesn't quite go like that. And through, like an express train through the middle of it comes populism, which says doesn't matter what you are, we all agree on it. So it's an interesting time. To be honest, the fewer labels there are, the happier I am in discussing anything. Personally, I don't like people calling people lefties. I don't think it's very productive at all. Or you know, the whole reform thing of if you don't like this, you're a communist. What communism is this? Where? We're in 2025 now. And you know, a good idea is a good idea, but it doesn't matter where it comes from. And I think that's also very much an SDP way of thinking. A good idea is a good idea. It may have been classed as X, Y, or Z before, but we've got a very Anglo-futurist bent to us as well. We're looking to the future, so it's not a return to 1974. You know, we're not looking to turn the back. We're saying, what is the other way in which in 2025 and going forward, we can work in the country's best interests, have an industry, make our own stuff, people and place, who's making it, where are they, and take that forward with a modern twist that also, the important bit, and this is where I think people get frustrated where they join political parties, it's a long vision to shore up the things that have been abandoned. Takes time. There's political will as well, as we'll possibly discuss, where you can just wake up in the morning when you're in power and say, we're going to do this. Yeah, fine. But also it takes time. And that the vision we've got is to make us less vulnerable to ever being in this position again. Because personally, I just think it's an absolutely atrocious position we've got ourselves in. And you could see it slowly happening. And of course, voter apathy, I'm not blaming voters at all, but if you don't like it, there is a system in place. It works because people get in power. So it definitely works, but you have to go out and vote. Yes, you do. You have to have an opinion. And we're getting into the time now in politics where you do have to have an opinion. I think indifference is now a luxury. I think saying, I don't care, I'm going to the minibar at the bottom of my garden and going to enjoy my house in France and forget about everything. Don't think that's an option. I think whoever gets in power from whatever persuasion they are cannot afford to leave the majority of the electorate alone. I think this party is going to show us what that does when you do that. When you get down on, what did they get on a third? You're going to tell me this now because you're smart.
About that, about a third,
And this is where, I go into a bit of David Starkey. And when you think of the constitutional chaos they can wreak with that many votes, basically, in this period of time, because if 4 or 5 years is not much, and yet it's everything, when you get a move on and you're waking up and you're making big snap decisions, a lot of damage can be done in that time. We're already very damaged. I'm not an alarmist. I'm like, oh my God, the state of Britain, isn't it awful? Let's just all clear off. Absolutely not. You stay and you fight. You do something about it. But to do that, you've got to join a party with a vision, not arguing the old arguments, not just blaming, not based on a dream, a Thatcherite dream that totally relied on a Thatcher to be able to live and breathe. And stopped in the day in 19, when it was in 90, I was glued to the telly all day that day. That day in the afternoon when it all just stopped. When Mrs. Thatcher was no longer in power. That's when Thatcherism stopped, and she always said that if there is such a thing as, she never confirmed there was such a thing as Thatcherism. So I don't buy the reheated Thatcherite. People look at Millet. Do you know what Argentina went through to get to Millet?
Yeah,
I suggest they have a look and see what Argentina went through. And how much is it really politics in the interest of a country to just come in and say we're going to get rid of a load of bureaucracy and a load of people and just focus on the markets and the money, and everything will be all right. We went through that one. Those of us who are old enough to remember, it wasn't all right.
Yeah.
And you soon forget the 3 or 4 boom years when the recessions hit. Luckily, we're very good at covering them up now, and we're probably in several of them now, and we don't even realise because the way they're reported is different.
Yeah, and I do notice that within politics now, you've mentioned it before with reform, that they're, as you say, they're an element of that sort of reheated Thatcherism.
I can see the appeal of it, because not everybody wants to be interested in politics. They're like, I just want to do my work. I want you to leave me alone. Don't intrude into my life. Don't stop me doing things. Don't take too much tax away from me. And give me something good to wave a flag to, and I'll be doing well. And it would be nice to know that England's doing well financially. Brilliant. Yeah. What happens is the people that will come and bring that dream to you, that they will sell it to you like that. But at the end of the day, they're business people, aren't they? And even if the reform ideology, everything about it was perfect, they had a lot of money, a lot of sway, some brilliant people, absolutely. But their actual problem is the problem at the top, which is stopping them doing anything. And they're close to power at the moment, and they've got that problem, which has always been the problem. I've seen it develop. Interestingly enough, I was listening to Gerard Batten talk about the UKIP days last night, and it was, it's been there since day one. But it's a conundrum. So when people say to us, but you haven't got enough exposure and you haven't got any money and all that, I'm like, it's not everything, those things, because you can have all those things, but if you've got trouble on the top table, that's never going to be resolved. And if one person leaving from that top table is going to take a lot of your vote away, then you have a larger problem with whether you've got enough money and that you're getting enough adverts and people being interviewing on the telly, I would argue.
Yeah.
Because it's, a taste of honey is worse than nothing at all. Not that I'm saying we're nothing at all, but.
Yeah. It's, as you say, it's been a long-running issue that you have, we should just mention that this is very much a matter of, whether you're talking about UKIP, the Brexit Party, or Reform as it is now, it is very much, they all tend to look like a one-man band for Nigel Farage. Now, Nigel Farage is a very talented man and has done many things, but he doesn't seem to play well with others, shall we say.
No, he doesn't. And it's not a problem until you get close to power, because you've got to play with others. Yeah. But I had this theorem, I don't know the gentleman at all. I've sat there and watched him talk once. But I'm not sure he's enjoying being an MP. I've always maintained I didn't think he ever wanted that. I think he was annoyed with the direction the Conservatives took. I mean, let's not take up too much time talking about him, but he was annoyed with the direction the Conservatives took. And there's a sort of there's some vindication flying around in the background that's going to happen one day where he gets to some point. But I don't think the Conservative Party is going to go down on its knees and say, thank you, Nigel, you're our saviour, please, we will now. I don't think that's going to happen. Just as I don't think that the Conservative Party is going to disappear, like people say, 0 seats and all this, and it's absolutely had it. All it takes is for a generic to slip into the leadership, and you will see, they'll flood back. People like to see strength, people like to see... It's just some people have got it and some people haven't. It's almost like showbiz. They say, politics is showbiz for ugly people, but you either got it or you haven't. And if you've got a pull factor, and if you talk enough sense, you're a clear enough communication, if you're credible, they will come to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can sort of see that, though personally can't stand the man. Tony Blair had that. He
Of
was,
course, I mean, the politics, we're still in Blair's era.
Yeah.
In terms of, they can't believe the success this guy had. Forget, I don't want to forget Iraq, but let's not go down that road. This guy came in, it was pure showbiz. He schooled, if you talk to people about him before, he was a bit of a weirdo. They were saying stuff like that in the books that I've read anyway. And very much always an attention seeker, very much an actor, which is why I couldn't wait to do anything going to do with acting. He was very much an actor. So I think if you look at him through that lens, that was certainly my background years ago. Let's not talk about it. Then you get him completely, but he was incredibly successful purely in terms of a political career. Get in on an absolute tide of enthusiasm. You had to be there in '97. It was a big deal whether you enjoyed it or not. And people like my area is very interesting because they were traditionally a load of builders that, let's say, self-employed builders who'd done well under Thatcher, or people who bought their council houses. And they were very much so. For them to switch, for anybody to switch at the time from having voted Conservative and Mrs. Thatcher to Tony Blair, it's there are wins and there are wins. That's a big deal. So there was this huge tide. I hadn't realised that I wasn't politically mature enough in certain areas to realise what was going to happen. So now when I listen to Dr. Starkey talk about certain things, I'm like, yeah, I didn't realise that at the time, and I'm really now I see it, and I'm very concerned about because I said it in a previous interview. You always thought Labour's going to come in, they're going to tax the hell out of the rich, they're going to get rid of the House of Lords. They didn't do that.
Yeah.
There was the Cool Britannia, everyone just hobnobbing with each other. Load of money going, circling around, and people clinking champagne glasses. The House of Lords just got larger, more people, totally full of Labour.
Yeah.
Appears as that continues now, to the extent that where it is almost laughable, the balance. Not the balance, sorry, I think there are more Conservative peers now, to be good. Correct me on that. But they never really get rid of anything like that. Well, the constitutional changes seem to now be about, we know we're on a sticky wicket this time around, so let's find a way to keep going no matter what. I'm sure they're working to a plan. I saw it's all as any party would. Let's do all the bad stuff at the beginning and then start giving the cookies out later on, and then everyone will leave on a high and then they'll vote for us. But I think it was fairly widely acknowledged that they wouldn't have much of a margin to do any large moves. So we end up talking about windmills and energy all the time. And everyone wants to talk about, people like me, I'm going to talk about the national debt.
Yeah.
I want to talk about why young people can't buy a house still. I want to talk about why local councils are hoovering up a load of accommodation, which is skewing the rental market, and many other things. I don't want to talk about Ed and his windmills. We all want a cheaper energy, but I think they were working, the part of the globalist thing is that you've got cheap clothes and cheap food. What's your problem? It's a view of how society is. It's like, what's your problem? It's a problem, and we don't want it, and go away.
Just before we go any further, we got a couple of comments. So we got this chap you'll recognise. Clausewitz, hello, Paul.
Hi.
James Bury Strong, and then Sol Smithman with a word that you Peter you'll never, which will be new to you, premium
indeed. I'm talking a load of old waffle and people still like it. That's what I want. Power.
I think at this point we might as well just go on to talk about your very strong performance on X quite a lot of the time.
Okay, we can talk about it. Or as I call it, messing around.
Yeah. Because you have got...
it's a funny platform. I think it's much maligned.
Yeah.
And people always say it's not like real life. It's absolutely like real life. Everyone's got the knives out for you. As soon as people detect a weakness, 10 people come along. How is that not like real life? I'm sorry if that sounds too cynical. But there's some beautiful moments on Twitter. People say nice things, stupid stuff. You know, some people really like saying good morning. It really makes their day. I don't know if they've given up greeting people in the street because they got a bad reaction. Some people have a brilliant day just by saying good morning. So if that's your thing, I enjoy it. Could I live without it? Well, I lived without it before.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, you know, from we're talking about the development of the internet, and a lot of people see Twitter as the nadir of things, whereas I see it as the zenith of it, really, because it does reflect real life with all its horrors.
Yeah.
And its beautiful moments too, but maybe that's a bit too romantic for people.
And there are those occasions where somebody puts something out that you just it's just the humour of it you can't get beyond. There's occasions when they will put something up which reminds you why you'll never leave X.
It's that sometimes I purposely ambiguous. I mean that must be obvious. You know, I just put ambiguous stuff out which can be read about 3 different ways. Never particularly on one side. Sometimes I am. You know, when you always know when you're expressing your own opinion because nobody agrees with you, and you get 4 likes, and that's the end of it, or you get blanked. So, but it's interesting to hop into somebody else's skin who you think might be saying something, or how they might think. You know, and it's painful to watch, for example, some political interviews, and I'm like, I know what you want to say. Come on, you can do it. And they won't do it because there are a variety of reasons. So one of my pet things, which is stupid and childish, is doing a little dialogue of what they really want to say, or that kind of thing. Yeah, I enjoy X a lot. I do. I actually got myself banned for the first time without realizing, by just using a word that I wouldn't normally. It's not even a rude word or anything like that.
Yeah.
I have no swearing rule as a rule. I swear a lot in real life, so I don't swear on X. And I got myself a 24-hour ban or something. I was like, how could you make that mistake after recently in the past 6 months?
Yeah.
Anyway, we all make mistakes, even old turkeys like me. But it's good, you know, it's good fun. I genuinely really, really laugh sometimes. And the people that amuse me are not the people, well, I'm odd as well. So the things that make me laugh, some people really make me laugh.
Yeah.
And they've got 20 followers or something. They're not the big names.
Yeah.
You know, when it's formulaic, I mean, you know, slop is a problem. I know what they call slop because it spoils it. We're all having a good time doing something, and it's like, no, I would just give you a very one-dimensional message, and it's all about yes or no and binary. Come on, you don't need to do that. But you know, I'm sure it costs a fortune getting to whoever does that to do it as well.
Yeah.
But it kind of spoils the party a little bit. But there are many things that could spoil it. But you know, Musk is an interesting character himself as well. Is he for the good? Is his involvement in politics, both at stateside and in England, any good? Well, we don't know yet. You know, there's parts of it are good and parts of it are not so good.
Yeah. I mean, I do notice. I remember there was one thing that was going around X a couple of months ago saying that if Elon Musk was around and X were around in the 1930s, they'd know who he would be siding with. And obviously they were referencing the Nazis. And all I could think was, if Elon Musk was around and X were around in the 1930s, 1, he'd be in London. 2, he'd probably be supporting the Tories. 3, in South African politics, he'd be a very big admirer of Jan Smuts. And 3, he'd probably be supporting Jewish refugees trying to come out of Germany. It just shows how strange people have this strange attitude towards him, that he's this.
I think there's a panic going on in traditional thinkers and political sticks in the mud, and they're trying to scare people to say anything new is going to be really, really bad. So I'm going to find the worst example I can think of, and it's very serious to talk about the 30s, but also what they're doing is they're diluting the the strength of the actual memories of those times by just saying anything could be that. And it's the same with so many things. And they're bandying commie and fascist around like nobody's business. It's like, do you even know? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Really, so often I feel I want to say to people, I try not to go for people on X on the whole. But really, you just want to say to people, I know you're not that dumb.
Yeah.
But we all sound dumb on there, and I like that. It's more forgiving than people think as well, X. I think,
Yeah.
because the amount of times I've heard someone say, "Well, you know what I said the other day," and the big cheeses, big names, say, "Well, I said that, and I don't really think that anymore," and not because they've been threatened legally, but they've had to think about it, and I like that. So it's nice to see in action, because without going down the religious road today, but forgiveness has been taken away and been classed as such a weakness, forgiveness, and it's not. And the things that have replaced the quality of forgiveness are not very pleasant at all, and I don't like them at all. But can we talk about how the assisted dying bill is awful? Can we talk about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
That's the other thing. You vote Labour, and you think, oh, working people, brilliant. Suddenly we're talking about death.
Yeah.
And euthanasia, and it's like, was that on the cards? Was that a thing? I don't know. Somebody said to me the other day, you could say that about any party that pre-election and post-election, the chasm between what they said and what they say and what they do. But just the way that bill's being run through with very limited criticism, or a scripted criticism almost, it feels like. And I think the depth of feeling, I don't think that they realise the depth of feeling in the country for the people who are against that. I understand I do understand the arguments for it.
Yeah.
But if you suddenly feel that you're the taker away of suffering, I can understand how you would think that. There's some really good people around as well. The lady's name, I forget now. I meant to on purpose remember it. Suzanne, the doctor, who was on one of the Unheard Things yesterday. She was talking about overdiagnosis of medical stuff. Just keep on the medical thing. And she was saying exactly what overdiagnosis is. It's not saying it's all in your head and you're putting it on, but it's just saying, when they try and screen as many people as possible and widen the net as much as possible, to save, that on the basis of saving one person, and another, it doesn't balance out, in other words, because people, once you tell them they're ill, they get a hold of another load of symptoms. And it brings on another load of things which are not always conducive to a longer life. So anyway, that's a very, very bad description of a very, very clever lady, and everyone should read her book. But yes, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to be happy about this Labour Party at the moment. They're in power. There's no good news.
No, I just, with the eventual reform, that being reheated Thatcherism, this is very much reheated Blairism. But
and that relied on a Blair as well. It certainly didn't when it went downhill up as out of the country, actually, for most of the Gordon Brown's time, which is a shame. But I caught the tail end of it. But some things that were introduced then were ruddy awful.
Yeah.
But these isms, they normally rely on the person who started it being around.
Yeah.
I mean, Thatcher, schooled, if you like, John Major into continuing him, and he didn't, in the slightest, really. From early on, not suddenly, slowly, it was slow decline, a sort of thin end of the wedge. None of that. I remember, when we first heard him in the Commons, I remember hanging around to hear his first speech and everything else. And you just knew it was, this is why my constant theme of decline. It's decline in one sense, but I don't want to get too miserable about it. But it just means that's over.
Yeah.
Thatcherism is over. Blairism, after this time, trust me, you'll want it to be over and never, ever back again in any shape or form. You will have had enough of it by this time, But I do feel for the party activists, for the people who stand, not so always for the MPs, because they're very ambitious animals, and they will. People go all over the place. Look at, there's a Liberal Democrat that's gone to reform. How does that work?
Yeah.
What goes through one's head during that process, I wonder. But I do feel sorry for the party activists who work very hard in any party. And part of their hard work is the faith that they maintain.
Yeah.
The unshakable faith in the party, and it's disgraceful, actually, that they allow them to do that while taking them down roads which are so far away from the reason they joined and the reason they every action and supportive thing they do for the party. I think it's disgraceful. Look, they're quite happy doing that.
Yeah.
But I do feel sorry for a lot of people within, not just other parties as well, been taken so far away from what they it must be incredibly difficult to be a Conservative at the moment. How does that work? Just sitting there waiting for someone. If you think Kemi's brilliant, she's a nice lady. She is a nice lady. She's not dumb. Does she really have it? I don't believe so.
No.
But she'd be a brilliant minister within a government. She'd be a brilliant minister within a government, absolutely. But for the top job, I don't think so. But I'm not here to solve the Conservative Party's problem. Even though I may sit here looking like one.
Actually, I do actually have a question.
They wouldn't want me in them, and I would certainly don't. Or any other party. I love the party I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm terribly enthusiastic about it because I know what goes on behind the scenes. I know how policies. I like the democracy within. I like William. I like Hillary. I like just about everybody involved.
Yeah.
And I like the way it does business. If I can put it like that. Absolutely like the way it does business. It does have a vision. It is getting larger, and it will have broad appeal to people once they let go of this. But Labour will get it right this time, or we can just, or the Tories will get it right this time. How many times do you need to be slapped in the face, or put your hand in the oven before you ouch? How big does the ouch have to be, and how far does the country have to go down the road? It feels like ruin. It feels like ruin. And especially in younger people, I keep coming back to the same thing. Politics to a certain degree, it's older people looking after the vulnerable and younger people. I don't know, the famous Oakeshott a quote, I think, that Peter Hitchens says. Basically politics is looking after the people that need help.
Yeah.
It's not the I want to save a load of tax club.
Yeah.
I haven't really, with a fine tooth comb, gone through reforms policy. What are they going to do when they get in tomorrow? What are they going to do? Free markets, the markets are brilliant. Everyone's, get some shares and you'll be all right. We went through that.
Yeah.
And those recessions were bad. And there were certain families, mine included, had a bad time during the 1990-ish. It was bad. And we don't forget. And that, unfortunately, in politics, so many people don't forget, and we're all fighting old grudges. And if we could just not do that, we'd probably have a better time. And just look, I say to people as well, when they want to vote for a party or they join a party, especially young people as well, it's not about you. It's about the country. So join a party whose vision for the country makes you feel, I never use the word pride as well. I don't like the word pride or being proud for this. I'm proud of that, and whatever. But makes you feel, you're governing for the whole country. I don't think this Labour government's governing for the whole country.
No.
They're not even trying to hide it. They're like, oh yeah, you were good to us, so we'll bung you a few quid or give you a. She'll probably get sued for libel, but it's okay. I've got a great solicitor. Join a party and think about it's like a JFK thing. It's what you can do to help the country as a whole.
Yeah.
totally independent. This is why identity politics doesn't work for me, because it makes you just think about yourself all the time and how you're being treated and whether you're being treated right. And then there's this comparative thing and competitive thing. It just doesn't work. We have to. The glue is what unites us.
Yeah.
But we make that glue ourselves, and it doesn't happen by saying, what can you do for me? I will vote for you if. So I'm very, and this is why I'm different from other people in the party, I suppose. If you want to join the party, but join the party because you believe in the policies and you like how we do business, and you'll be very, very welcome. But if you don't want to stay, or if you're party hopping or killing time, you're not going to enjoy yourself, because we've got a strong vision for what we want the country, how we want the country to be in every area.
Yeah.
So you won't enjoy it. But people, and also don't feel obliged to join a political party. You can vote for a party. You can give some money to a party. Please, also, while I'm here, please give some money to the SDP, especially you rich people out there. I know you all. Well, a couple of mil won't hurt. We take donations, but I've done that before. I've given money to a party that I haven't even been a member of, because I thought, I like what they're doing. It won't hurt. If you'll just stop having your avocado toast and Netflix millionaires, then you can afford to give some money to the SDP. But do invest in us, because we're going places, and we've got a vision for a strong Britain that looks after itself.
Yeah.
It's very easy to, and I understand why people get excited, especially younger people sometimes, about dreams of the empire and that. It's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone. But we're certainly not going to apologise for it. We don't need to feel bad about ourselves. Any movement that says we need to feel good about ourselves, and to do that we need to make you feel bad about yourself, is probably not one that you want to hang around with.
No.
And it's built on a false premise, isn't it? Because it's pushing putting your foot on somebody else's head doesn't work. Of course, the argument is you did it first, but that's the way 100 Years' Wars.
Yeah.
Go on. Anyway, ask me something else, because I start rambling.
Oh, yes. Actually, one issue I would like to ask you about is, you mentioned old grudges. This may count as one, but the issue of the European Union, because I know that the SDP was in favour of leaving the European Union at the current administration, and the original illustration of the SDP in the 1980s was pro-European. Have your views of British membership of the European Union changed over the years, or have you always been one side?
I've always been anti. But the reason is I'm half Greek, and I've spent time in the unfashionable part of the EU. It's actually fashionable now, but it wasn't in those days. And I've seen what's happened. I've certainly seen what's happened in the decade of the 2000s. But here's the weird thing that probably people wouldn't expect me to say today, and it's my view only. If you like the way European politics and political parties work, the SDP is closer to that than any other party. So whereas we don't want to be part of the federalist EU experiment, whatever you want to call it, there is a European feel, even though it's all very patriotic of the country. There's something about our politics that I think would appeal to anybody who likes the way European politics works. I don't know if anyone's going to agree. We get a load of flack for that. That's my feeling of it. Has my view of the leaving the EU changed? No. And it won't do. And I think the people who are very pro EU and taking it back in, what are their motives?
Yeah,
they're the very people who criticise you and say, "Oh, you're trying to relive the past." And well, you're trying to relive the past. They vote with ages ago. I know they tried very hard to block it. And that's the other reason I'm sorry to go off on a tangent. I'm involved in politics as well, because the Brexit vote was fascinating. Yes, you can have the arguments and say there's a load of Russian bots that did it. It wasn't. It was people who never vote. Never vote. who come out, and I'm really interested in those people, and I'm interested in representing those people, and those are the people in my, whatever it is, political dabblings that I would like to reach and talk to, because very often they're very reserved, and they look down on, you know, they're like binary choices. Very often it's like in or out, yes or no. Now, obviously, we're not going to become Switzerland and start asking that every single year. Do you like mornings? Yes or no? Please vote today. Yeah. But, you know, those are the people I like to reach, and I'm very, very, very keen to represent forgotten about people in the underclass.
Yeah.
And I've worked in a mixture of housing and with people who've been in custody for years. So I'm very concerned about that whole class of people, how they get like that, how they can be helped. And not everybody is. But I'm not a goody. But I'm very much interested that any interest I have in politics, ultimately, if you really scratch the surface, that's my interest. Anyway, so yes, my opinion of the EU hasn't changed because I've seen it from the other side as well. You know, people haven't seen this. It's embarrassing, really, at the town halls abroad where everyone's lining up. It's literally a queue of people, and they're all lining up for a grant because that's how you do it. It just reminded me of the bread lines you saw just before the collapse of the Soviet Union. Everyone's, you know, hanging around for one loaf of bread. It just felt a lot like that. And there is this, it's penury 1 minute, and then the next minute, oh, have a load of grants, and we're going to do your country up and make it. Usually politics, isn't it? You know, do nothing or then do everything because when you think there's a vote in it. And I can't stand that sort of politics. I know that's how it goes to a certain degree, or has gone, but there is certainly another way. And the communitarian approach and the approach the SDP's got is miles away from that. We don't think like that. And that is not a weakness, that's a strength, and that'll be borne out over time.
Yeah.
Next question.
Oh, I'm just going to come back to what you said about the people in 2016 who hadn't voted before, or hadn't voted for ages, who did vote. Because I remember I was at university, and I've always been anti myself, and a close friend of mine, he was working for a local Labour MP, and we were talking about referendum. His MP wasn't actually getting involved in the EU referendum campaign, and so he was looking at it from the sideline. And I was just telling him about the people I'd spoken to. I wasn't involved in the campaigning, but I was just speaking to people generally inside the pub. And there were people, as you mentioned, who hadn't voted sometimes for 25 years, who said they were going to go out and vote and vote leave. And he was just saying, do you really think they're going to leave the council estates to vote? And what I always remember that because on the night of the referendum, me and him watched the referendum together over Skype, and you could just see his face, the sheer shock as the leave vote came in, and as he witnessed that those people on the council estates had got up and they had voted.
Right. They had. And what would they vote for now? Why? It had to be because they're not factored in. But it goes back to, I mean, you know, we haven't got enough time to go into immigration. That's probably a good thing because everybody's talking about it all the time. And I think everyone's pretty much up on the arguments for and against by now. So a lot of it's regurgitating, which I try not to do, especially not when I'm being interviewed. For those people, I want to mobilize.
Yeah.
I want to deal with the indifference from politics coming from the top, coming down. And I also want to mobilize the voters to come and vote. You are part of the process, and there is a vision for you through some people like the SDP, that you are part of a community, how that works, what that looks like, and let's get it all moving again. Rather than everyone's living this disconnected life where they're not doing very well financially, they don't feel represented, they're confused about their environment and the country, how it's become, and where they fit into that, and they're not spoken to, certainly respectfully, and they're cast as an impediment, an embarrassment, for absolutely no reason. It's just politically inconvenient. inconvenient to politicians of
Yeah.
the recent stripe for them to have to consider those people, because they don't behave in a way that's quantifiable or easily swayed. They're very, and that's strength. And I love that strength about them. Even if
Yeah.
they may not like me and tell me to bugger off, well, no problem at all. I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
They're the people I want to talk to.
Yeah. And one thing I've always thought about, just on the EU bit, I've always thought the reaction to the losing the vote in 2016 is in part because, and this is going back a bit in history, after the Suez Crisis in 1956, the sort of British political
It wasn't
elite.
my fault. Don't look at me. But go on.
British political elite. At that point, Britain had an opportunity to say, "Do we have a role in the world, and what is that role?" And instead,
Absolutely.
the establishment at the time, and then the political class that took over from them in the 80s and 90s, decided just to use Europe as an imperial substitute. And whereas the general public, by say the early 70s, came to the opinion, yeah, the empire's over, we're now a post-imperial nation. And in 2016, what you had was the general public exposing the political class as living in a fool's paradise about Europe. And that since 2016, you've had the political class throwing a massive wobbly, which they haven't yet stopped doing.
Yeah, and it's not trying to demonize a class, but it's very, very middle class. Everything about the EU, England's adoption of it,
Yeah.
the benefits of it were mainly felt by middle class people. And the middle class, just as in 2016, that whole class of people, which can't easily correctly be identified as working class because it goes beyond that almost, just as those people felt the needle, ever since, the middle class just won't have it. And that's why the Liberal Democrats are doing so well, because it's like it's the middle class boo-hoo club. Yeah. Boo-hoo, they're building something near me. Boo-hoo, we need to get back into the EU. And boo-hoo, where's our leader? He's trampolining today,
Yeah.
I don't see, especially since the Conservative Party were doing such a brilliant job. It was like, Rory Bremner level of imitation of the Liberal Democrats in the recent years. Why the Liberal Democrats even exist now? Everyone keeps talking about mergers. Why don't Conservatives? Why don't the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives merge? Come on, let's do this. You've got a nice guy with a knighthood at the top. It'll be nice. But maybe those people, that's the clear out, really, if you like, that should have happened with a strong Conservative leaders to just say. I think they did try it a bit. But I think people are fooled about who Boris Johnson was as well. They thought he was this sort of Churchillian, absolutely nothing at all like that at all. He's very Lib Dem.
Yeah.
He was continuity Lib Dems. So's Theresa May. I mean, One Nation. Anyone who really says One Nation Conservative with this meaning in recent decades is just saying I'm a Lib Dem. Thanks very much. There's nothing wrong with being a Liberal Democrat, but let's not. If your the main thrust of what you do, and I think David has done something. I can't remember what he recently did something I thought was quite good. But if the main thrust of what you do is all about being back in the EU and saying, "My God, it was the worst thing that we ever did," what does that say about the politics about your country? If the worst thing that could ever happen is you leaving a trading group, what does that say about the state of your country in the first place?
Yeah,
but nobody wants to see it from that angle, apart from the brilliant SDP, who you all should vote for and give money to at any given moment, generously, I'd add.
Yeah.
So it's a very different vision. The Liberal Democrats, they're nothing to do. We're really not like them at all. The SDP, it's just not in similar. Of course, in local politics, I support everybody. I love the Greens and everything. The Greens aren't that. There's some interesting stuff in their policy, but then it gets screwier and screwier as you go along. But locally, that's the other thing you learn by getting involved in local politics, just a bit even, dipping your toe in the water. It's how lovely the people are. And, you may sit at a hustings and have to rip the hell out of each other or tear a stripe off each other. But, there's a respect going around because they felt what you felt, going up there and doing that. You find some common ground, and it's also important to listen, because very often people's political influences aren't within their own party; they're from out of the party. They will say it's just because this person was a good communicator or the way they thought. And you should be always open to that and not closed minded and say, well, unless it's coming from my party or within that sphere, but I don't want to learn it. Teachable moments come everywhere.
As we just gone past the hour, I'll ask one final question, which is, as very much I do book reviews, is there a book that you've read or reread recently that you found particularly interesting?
Well, despite my collection of them, I bought a Bible recently, which was it's fun I hadn't. But I'm just having a look. Now, I recently revisited Eric Ambler, who I used to read a lot when I was a kid. I'd forgotten how crackingly good his books are.
Yeah.
So anything Eric Ambler, I'm very much Eric Ambler. You should read. It's and any literature or any television or anything in a world that's so complicated, and when your mind is so busy, and it's very, very difficult to focus. It's never been, not just for old people, but for everybody to focus. Yeah. Try and read something or do something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Doesn't tax you too much and entertains you. Because the way we are entertained, we should be sophisticated entertainment should be absolutely. But your brain needs a break, and it needs a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a simple story that's a ripping yarn, simply told, well told. So I would always recommend that to people rather than fancy. I could make up any old book. Eric Ambler all the way, everybody. Do it instantly.
I can very much recommend Eric Ambler myself. I've read quite a few of his books over the years, and also I should also recommend the two films based on his books. And I've forgotten the other one. The one Journey into Fear, I think it is.
Yeah.
With Joseph Cotton, I think, is in Journey into Fear, and also I think Orson Welles is in one of the films as the Turkish policeman, Colonel Hackey, I think.
Orson Welles, the Turkish policeman. It had to be, didn't it? Really.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Aaron. I must say. I don't always make sense. I'm very new to this kind of thing, anyway. Really, believe it or not. So I tend to ramble too much, and but it's been hugely enjoyable.
It's been a great pleasure as well. So what I'll say at this point, I'll just say bye to people watching. I should say, if you weren't able to capture this, watch this all the way from the start, this is recorded so you can watch it back through again. So with that, BookTube, I will say goodbye, and I will see you probably tomorrow. Bye, BookTube.
We have to go on tomorrow. Do tune in tomorrow, everyone, at 6 for the person that he said before.
Oh, yes, it's interviewing Andrew Verlaine, who's an Irish author, and it's his first. Actually, I'll show you the book here.
Far more worthy than me. 6 o'clock tomorrow, Andrew Verlaine.
Well, we'll be talking about his debut novel, Stigma.
It's not about the Stig, is it? Oh, right, no, I see.
No. It's about it's a speculative fiction novel where a company produces a cutting-edge VR technology that enables you to experience things like depression, schizophrenia, that sort of thing. And the story is about the experience of one of the testers and also what the creators are actually up to. So it's sort of
very human engineering-ish.
Yeah, I can recommend it. It's really good. And I should say I have got a review of it on my channel. So if you want to watch that before I do the interview with Andrew, people are more than welcome to do that.
Great idea. Well, I wish everyone a pleasant evening.
I'll just go through the last couple of comments. Thank you, Classwitz. And
thank you, Bo.
There you go.
Love you, Clausey. Djokovic fan.
So with that, I'll just end the stream. So just wait a second.
Ciao for now, everybody. Bye.